Okay, so here's the way that I see it. Like, we gotta kind of recapitulate and redefine and refine the stories that we tell ourselves every day, so that we don't look at ourselves in a judged way, where we cast judgment on ourselves and diminish our true potential and our true capacity, which is infinite, and sacrifice it for something much less than that. Because what's happening and has been happening throughout history is exactly that. I love the quote. I'm not going to say it. Doesn't matter. I think either we're in a very young universe, or that history has been reset very recently. And I'm leaning more towards history has been reset recently. But scientifically speaking, which is a narrative we have to acknowledge, we're in a pretty young universe. A young civilization, a young species. So it makes sense that this is how things are happening. And that, it makes sense that we're coming out of we're like a young child is immature and stupid and foolish that reaches out for the stove and burns themselves. They don't know. They just don't know. So here's another story to tell yourself that probably nobody's ever told you. What the Buddha discovered is that there was no self. And that's because he fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, and then he slept underneath that tree or something. I forget which order this goes in, but he slept underneath this tree, and when he woke up, he had the realization that there is no self. That the self, it doesn't exist. It's just an illusion of the mind. And that everything that we attribute to the self, our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, our character, our name, every association, you got to think about all the things we've developed out of intellectual thought and abstraction, like the scientific method, like language, like all these things are a part of the mind, and they're a part of the Maya. According to the Buddha, there is no self. And what allowed the Buddha to get into that state was that he attended to the spirit, as they would say. And this just means he started to clean up house. He fasted. He meditated. He prayed. He did these things. He lived a life of aestheticism. He sought only wisdom. But when you meditate, and you do that for long enough, and we've done the scientific research on this, you can look up on Google, meditative brainwave states, and you'll see that what happens in the synchronization of the hemispheres is it goes from a very interpolated, shifty, I wouldn't say interpolated, because that's not exactly how things work in there, apparently. I've yet to figure out. It's a very shifty system. Sorry, I'm driving and cutting people off. Let me think about where I was. The brain, when they look at it in an EEG, you've got different areas of it. Some of it are highlighted red, and some of it are highlighted green, and some of it are highlighted yellow, and it just responds to the neural coherence that's going on within the structure of, your neurons, your axons, everything that makes up the brain chemistry. And when you put a person in a meditative state, or somebody who's been doing meditation for a long time, is that you draw together all the neural synchronizations, and they form a perfect, not necessarily perfect, because it is a fluctuating, flexing, undulating, graph data. You can look at these on the internet. I'm just trying to explain what the graph is through the words. but it's an amorphous field of neural interface. And it's all synchronized. It's concentric. It's red in the center, and then it's orange, and then it's yellow, and then it's green. What the meditation does is it allows your brain hemispheres to communicate properly with each other. And the creative mind starts to communicate with the analytical mind, and it brings about new perspectives and new grander understandings of how the two things of the, not the two things, but the bifocal world which you experience, because you do, as soon as you open your eyes, you look through two different orifices, and you receive data that gets stored in your brain, and it gets impacted and reflected into your brain in different ways. But sometimes you're more inclined to not be in a creative mindset. You're being very analytical, and you're not seeing it from the right mind state. And so you have to get out of that mind state, and you got to go do something that's a ritual to you. Like James Watson, when he discovered DNA, or when he had the idea come to him that it would be in a spiral shape. He was sitting on a train or a bus, I think, in transit to work, in a daydream, and the thought comes to him. You don't believe me? Look it up in the book, because I read it, motherfucker. Sorry, but it's true. So, when your brain gets in this state and it starts syncing up with itself and the two hemispheres start to communicate, this comes as a result of you maintaining a state of disconnection with the mental phenomena that's going on within your consciousness. Just trying to focus more so on the space between your thoughts rather than attaching and experiencing yourself with the thoughts. But the cool thing is that a scientist figured out, okay, we measured, motherfucker is cutting me off. My brain hemispheres are a fucking, there's a damn Marine too. Alright. Excuse me. I'm gonna keep this under 11 minutes, I swear. When the brain syncs up like this, the scientists have been able to measure this. Look it up. It's called hemisync. It's called binaural beats. Because we're able to measure it, we're able to mimic it and induce it with technology. And so we've done this with binaural beats. And when we've taken the monks from India and we brought them over here and we ran them through the trials and we put the EKGs on them, or the EEGs, and then we put the binaural beats onto them, they're like, you guys can just... They started laughing because they started making the joke that we're pumping people out into nirvana like it's a McDonald's or something. You can find that too. I'm going to source it if you need it, but I'm quoting. That was paraphrasing. What people have discovered through personal experience, and some very prominent scientists were semi-prominent. I don't know if they're prominent. They're not prominent at all, actually. I guess nobody knows about them. They've been around for 20 years or something with a reasonable theory, in my opinion. But that's just one case of millions. Now I'm talking about millions, potentially billions of people across the world. Go onto the internet every day, type into YouTube, binaural beats, they put these things on their ears, and they fall asleep. And when they go to sleep in nirvana, it somehow allows them to maintain consciousness in a theta brainwave. And that theta brainwave is normally the brainwave you're at when you're sleeping. But what happens when you maintain your consciousness in a state of meditation and you allow the beats to put your brain waves in that theta state for you, so that even if you're not good with your thoughts, which you will have to learn to tame if you are keeping up here, when you get in that theta state, you're sleeping. But when you're awake there, you're not. You're aware, you're conscious, but you're still in space. But what you find is that you're not in the same spaces that you were before. You're in a little bit different space. The lighting is a little bit different. The ambient temperature and feeling, the whole texture of the experience, time itself seems to be moving at a slightly different pace. And if you stay there long enough and you start to have thoughts and you have negative thoughts, or you are inclined to have depression, or you're not in control of your consciousness, you're not a sovereign consciousness, sovereign God, as it says in the Bible, the true God is sovereign, then you can start to manifest some things and they look like they are your worst nightmare. They don't look like they are your worst nightmare. And people call this sleep paralysis. And it is probably one of the most crippling experiences that faces a wide scale of human beings on the planet. It's an inhibitor. It's a self-fulfilled inhibitor. You are doing it. You're creating and manifesting it, but it's only because you are attaching yourself to the thoughts that you're having, which sometimes are very difficult to have. But that is the purpose of meditation, to try and continually edge away at that space between the thoughts so that you can elongate it, prolong it, and then finally truly fall through the cracks of reality. Because when you realize that you can float outside your body as a point of existence, and just by, there's not a word for it in the English language, but having a choice, making the intent, choosing to do this, having a feeling, but it's before a feeling. Ralph Waldo Emerson said the ancestor to every action is a thought, but I think that's a bit of a leap. I'd say the father and mother to every action and experience is the thought. Well, let me rephrase this one more time. The father to the experience is the thought. The mother to the experience is the emotion. And these two marry together. I forget what they call it. They call it something special in Hinduism. Doesn't matter. That's what creates, the divine communion. So, or that's what creates the reality, the covenant, the shared existence. So, when you can get into these spaces and you can choose to, or you can start to control your thoughts in the way that you can, in the way you should be controlling your thoughts, you can move outside of any space. You can move right outside your body. You can move right through the wall. You can move down the street. You can hover above houses and see inside of the houses without having to go through the walls. You can go teleport across the globe. You teleport across the globe by having the intent to do so, having the desire. Where do you want to go? And this is only because the whole function of reality, the whole essence of your prime, motives, if you will, is to create and to innovate. That's what consciousness does. It just creates and creates. Ask any neuroscientist. It's one of our main faculties, our uniqueness. If you read Descartes, who, if you go to school, you will learn about in every single science class you take, except biology maybe, and read about his school of thought, he'll tell you the same thing. So to come full circle, I went over 11 minutes. We sometimes confuse ourselves as just Nicholas Jensen Denton or Nick Denton or Nick, which is like a fraction of what you can experience. Because like when you talk about giving birth, maybe that's not a good example. I broke my elbow one time, and the pain, it was excruciating. It wasn't, okay, that's not a good example either. Let me think of another good example. No, I like the birth giving example because I'm not a woman, so I'm not speaking from experience. A woman can read about giving birth and read about giving birth and read about giving birth, but it's never going to be like giving birth. You never know what the experience is really going to be like. Essentially, the map is not the terrain. But what I'm telling you, be it truth or not, it's like the point is that we don't have the truth. No, that's not the point. Now I'm getting lost. Well, that is as the Tao goes, I guess. It takes a hold of you, and now I'm getting into the city. I'm about to head into class and get into a thought vortex. We'll see how it goes. Remember, these words may only have meaning for a brief moment in time. 100 years from now, this language will mean nothing. Nobody will know what it means. All our metaphors will be different. Everything's gonna change. We'll be all confused again. The spoken Tao is not the eternal Tao. How can we even take that statement as truth? Ugh. Anyways, I could be wrong about all of this. As you see, I don't have a lot of experience in the multiverse either, I know enough to know that it's there, and generally that's all that the multiverse, they say, that's all that it's gonna give you. Because, it'll give you what you need. That's the thing. And I think that's a big key to it. If you really want to get into those spaces where you can create a reality just by thinking about it, moving beyond simple teleportation to creating bodies and worlds, because words are worlds, just add an L, add the L. Yep. If you really want to get into the space where you can create worlds, what you want to do is begin to realize how your thoughts are already creating reality. And then eventually, you'll sync up the thoughts that come from the source within yourself with the reality. And then you'll be able to create your reality. And I mean that both in the physical world and in the non-physical. So people wonder, I guess people don't wonder, some people do, if they're researching the same stuff I am, how to get the fuck out of the matrix. We can literally go into a dream space, create a reality based off of our imagination, which is something capitulated off of our unique perspective, thoughts, and experiences in the reality we've been aware and awakened so far. And then we can even have the potential to craft bodies, any type of form to be in. You can share that with other beings. So that's my vision, to be quietly, what am I saying? To be frank, I feel bad for Frank. I had a boss at work. He was a Freemason. And he was real proud of it. So, not to be frank, I just think this is important stuff we should be talking about. Because it helps me synthesize. It helps me find balance and harmony and peace with others and the world as it is. And it also gives me the inspiration and the motivation to try and make a difference about what I perceive as negative, which is, for the most part, what we all perceive of as negative. Anyways, have a beautiful day, and for God's sakes, explore consciousness if you have to. You know, there's a million different ways.